Today on the show, I have returning sports dietitian Joel Totoro, good friend, good colleague, expert in supplements. And last time when I had him on the show, we were talking about if teen athletes should take creatine. What does the research look like? Is it safe? What is third-party testing? Why is that important? What do parents, coaches, athletes, what do you need to be looking for? And we kind of left you hanging on, okay, so if it is safe and if it, relatively speaking, does no harm, and teen athletes want to take it, what is the when, where, how much, all of the different components. So that is what we want to dial in on today. So really kind of dialing in on the specifics of creatine supplementation as it relates to how you do it well, and what kind of diet it should be accompanied with in order to see the best results. Okay, Joel, so let's dial in first things first. Every parent, coach, and athlete is wondering, how much creatine should a teen athlete be taking? And we all know about creatine loading. You know, we've heard research like way back in the day, you had to load, then you didn't have to load, and now you can load. So talk to us a little bit about the amount that would be considered safe, effective, and that we can feel good putting our stamp of approval on for teen athletes.
Yeah, the easiest answer is for most people, most weights, it falls in, and there's calculations you do. It falls into about 3 to 5 grams per day if
Yep.
you're just using it daily, right?
Right.
Uh, so creatine, I think the biggest misconception is it's a consistency over time thing. So we mentioned in the last episode, say you can hold 10 units of creatine in your muscles and your
Mhm.
diet's giving you six, right? You
Right.
just want to keep topping it off, right? And it's not
Right.
one where, oh my God, I missed my creatine. I'm going to be awful today, right?
Yeah.
So it's more of a consistency over time. So the best protocol, the best advice I have is the one you're going to do. Now there's ways you can do to optimize it, right? To make sure you absorb it the best and whatnot. Or if you have specific goals, and we'll go into all those. But for me, the simple, if you're ending the podcast now, is, kind of one scoop of protein, kind of daily, um, you know, over time. And it's one of those things where some people, I'm only going to remember to do it around my workouts.
Sure.
Cool. All right. So training days, whatever that allows you, but because it is that kind of consistency over time, you're still going to be okay, right?
Yeah.
It's not a catastrophic thing, and it takes quite a while, or like I think a month, to kind of drop completely out of your, depending on your loading. But if you were to completely stop taking creatine, to get
Mhm.
back to your kind of what your normal set point from what your body makes and what you eat.
Got it. So 3 to 5 grams safely a day. Talk to me about loading. So, concept of loading with about 20 grams of creatine a day for 7 days, then dropping to that
Mhm.
3 to 5 gram. Is it beneficial? Is it necessary? And if an athlete is going to load, how do you do it? Are you taking all 20 grams at the same time? Should it be split? And if so, when should you take it?
Yeah, so to me, it's like how fast or how dramatic your change is, right? So if you're about to start training twice a day and you're untrained, right, or you're
Right.
growing, then loading may be something you want to do, right? So it is, kind of 20 to 30 grams, 5 to 7 days. I would highly recommend splitting that dose up, kind of, I'd say probably 2 to 4 hours in between doses. Can do it around fueling or food, whatever that, again, consistency, what you're going to do day to day. And part of that is just, it's just going to be probably not great on your stomach to take it
Yeah.
all at once,
Yeah.
right? So, anytime you take a lot of anything, whether it's sugar or salt or creatine,
Yeah.
your body kind of floods water and it's like, oh, let's dilute this. And
Yeah.
then that water is now in your GI system. You got to deal with it. So, bloating, GI issues, all kinds of things could come with a very high dose at a very short time. And that's
Mhm.
really anything. So just give your gut a better chance to absorb it by splitting it out. And obviously, if you're in distress, you're not going to be training or recovering the way you want to. So for
Right.
me, definitely, if you're going to load, spread it out. So on the flip side, generally, if you're taking 3 to 5 grams a day for a month, you'll get to the same place you would be at the end of that 1 week of loading.
Hmm.
So it's just a matter of what works for you, what makes
Yeah.
sense, what your training kind of goals or your performance or wellness goals are. So yes, loading works. There's great protocols around it, great research around it. Definitely works. But it also is fine to just kind of add it as you go. And especially for me, for younger adolescents, especially if you're either changing a lot of things or for sure not right close to competition, this is something you want to
Right.
do
Off
leading up to it.
season.
So yeah. So I would say start in the off season if you've got the time and the planning to do just the kind of gradual, why not? You'll see the way you respond
Yeah.
to it, whatnot. So that's generally a recommendation for most people. But again, if you've got a time sensitive goal or a time sensitive need for more energy, like
Hmm.
we can talk about it later, but like the concussion protocols, it's very
Right.
high dose creatine for,
Right.
and so we know the body can handle it. It's just a matter of, again, are you wasting your money at some point, right?
Yeah.
And then two, do you have a need for it? So it's just, there's a lot of things to consider, but the answer is both. Either way works
Yeah.
at the end of the month.
Yeah, no, I like that. Well, and a lot of times it's your body can handle it. How well does it tolerate it initially? And I think anything in sports nutrition, for athletes that have never eaten before early morning trainings, I always tell them start with eating 2 bites of the granola bar and then work your way up to it, right? Like, don't just think you're
Yeah.
going to eat a big old bar and a banana. If you've never eaten before a workout and feel amazing, you need to work your way up to it. Same thing with sports drinks or carbohydrate during long bouts of activity. If you just start chugging away tons of carbohydrate, you're going to have a little GI distress. If you gradually train your gut to take it, you're going to feel a little
Yeah.
bit better. I think similar to what you're saying with creatine, if you've never taken it before and you like load the system with it, you could have some initial, they're probably more gastrointestinal
Mm.
disturbances, not necessarily problems, but disturbances. And so working your way into it, which I would argue, like I tell every athlete, you don't just go run a marathon, you run 1 mile, run a
Right.
mile, get that down, and then let your body build up to it. I feel like that would be the way that we're probably going to minimize some of the negative, just gastrointestinal responses or effects that might be with taking creatine. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I mean,
Okay.
it's the exact same reason why you don't try a new food on game day, right? It's just
Yes.
we're just why introduce a question mark
Why?
when there doesn't need to be, right?
Right.
So
Exactly.
yeah, yeah. Yep.
Now, you've kind of already debunked this, but I want to make this clear because this is a question I get asked a lot. Do I take creatine pre-workout, post-workout, or does it matter? You've already kind of alluded to it, but I just want to ask the specific question because I get asked that specific question a lot, and I
Yeah.
want to hear your expert answer on it.
So there's thought that when you're exercising, when you're using your muscles, right? If creatine's in your system, blood flow is increased, right? So the chance of a
Mhm.
nutrient to get to your muscles a little bit higher then, right?
Right.
So ideal for sure, yes. Peri-workout, pre, during, post, somewhere
Yeah.
around that area when your body's focused on muscle, right?
Right.
But as we look at the kind of research, again, it's the consistency over time. So for me, a lot of times I'll take it, it'll be with activity, right? Because that's just my
Right.
routine. But there's some people don't like things in their stomach right before they eat. Some people are like, oh, I just do it in the morning. Like
Right.
if I would say consistency or convenience equals compliance. So if it's gonna like trigger your head, like, oh, hey, I'm having breakfast, I'm having creatine, or
Yeah.
like lunchtime, I'm having creatine. Like if you're like, all right, this is just what makes sense to me,
Yeah.
you're not losing a significant amount because it is that over time. It's not like I
Mhm.
need 3 grams exactly. If it's, 2.5 today and 5.1 tomorrow,
Right.
like that's
Right.
all you'll get there. And again, once you're kind of topped off, then you're just kind of maintaining. So,
Yep.
for me, it's, yeah, ideally intra workout, but not drastic if you don't take
Okay.
it then.
Good news. Talk to me about hydration with creatine. Is it necessary to have more hydration? Does adequate hydration get the job done? What is your expert opinion there?
Yeah. So creatine kind of brings hydration with it to the muscle. So
Mhm.
if you've heard, some of the things you always used to hear about creatine is, oh, it's weight gain. It's, that was one of the big things. Yeah, but no. So you're just taking water that's in your body and moving it into your muscles, which has, been shown to decrease cramping and injury and all this stuff. There's all studies looking at
Mhm.
creatine in those. It's just a better environment in the muscle. Like
Yeah.
not at all technical, but I generally refer to it as a multivitamin for the muscle, right? It's that every day, one
Mm-hmm.
dose of multivitamin is not going to do anything. But if you're consistently avoiding
Yeah.
deficiencies, your just body's in a better state. Same thing.
Right.
A hydrated kind of creatine filled muscle is just in a better place. It's more resilient.
Yeah.
We've got a colleague who it's a example I've been using for 20 years, stolen, but you could take like a rare steak, right? It's malleable, it's
Mhm.
got some give to it. You can pound it, you can tenderize it,
Mhm.
bounces right back. Dehydrate that, make it jerky, it's ripping, it's tearing, it's all this stuff, right? So those are just kind of think about the environment of the muscle.
Yeah,
Just
I like
as
it.
an athlete, a hydrated muscle that has fuel in it, gonna go a long way, right? But so like if you're loading, just know that that shift is going to go, and it's usually a kilogram, so 2 to 3 pounds generally is what people will see
Mhm.
from water going into the muscle. But that does mean there's not that same amount of fluid in other parts of the body where it traditionally had been. So if you are
Mhm.
loading, yeah, just kind of make an effort to kind of one, what we've
Drink
talked about.
enough,
Yeah,
please.
most people
Yes.
aren't even drinking enough. We're kind of in a
Right.
chronically dehydrated
Dehydrated state, especially
country.
athletes,
Um,
especially athletes.
but yeah, so just pay attention to your normal hydration.
Yeah.
We always look at, things like urine color or making sure if it's a 2 a day and you end the practice 8 pounds lighter, let's make sure you're back to 8 pounds before the next practice, right? It
Yeah.
doesn't have to be immediate. So same thing, just have an idea of making sure kind of normal hydration. But yeah, so that was some of the issues we would see back in the day when people would talk about like cramping or this, that, the other thing.
Yeah.
It would be when they're doing those massive doses all at once, and water's just all not all your water, but more
Right.
water than is needed is in your body, but it's in your intestines where it's not being used for other things,
Right.
right? So a lot of the early concerns in the 90s about creatine were not from the creatine, it was from the way we were idiots about using it, right? So that's why
Right.
if you are loading, spacing it out so your body has time to understand what it took in, how to effectively
Mhm.
process it, absorb it, move it to where it needs to
Mhm.
be. So, yeah, so I would say not necessarily drastic changes to hydration, but just making sure you're adequately hydrated.
Okay, you said something that sparked my attention that I would like to bring up, and that is creatine and weight gain. So lots of athletes take creatine specifically in hopes of gaining weight, and then you have athletes that could probably benefit from taking creatine that maybe don't want to gain weight, and so it freaks them out, and they're like, "Can't take creatine because it could make me gain weight." What are your thoughts there in regards to, is it really making you gain weight, or is it that you're getting stronger in the weight room, which allows you to lift more weights, which allows you to put on more muscle? So indirectly, possibly, but maybe not directly.
Yeah, so both.
All.
Unfortunately, all of the above. Yeah, so like working with cyclists or somebody where weight is
Hmm.
super and
Yeah.
the center of gravity, all that stuff. So one of the things we talk about a lot as sports dietitians is functional mass, right?
Hmm.
So you gained 3 pounds, whether it's from carbohydrate loading and bringing those hydration
And
into the
those, yeah.
muscle, or the creatine bringing some hydration into the muscle with it. That's good weight. It's a
Yeah.
functional weight. Your body's able to do, you're going to be able to create more force, do work a little bit longer with a well-fueled, well-hydrated muscle. So just understanding again, now, if this is race day and you're suddenly 2 kilos heavier, that's a whole different thing, right?
Yeah.
So it is kind of going into being realistic with your coaching and your training to know the difference
Yeah.
between functional weight and non-functional weight, especially if you're in a weight class sport. On the other hand, people who are looking, especially we hear a lot of the teen athletes are looking to just gain weight. Now, again, first you have to keep growing, so fuel that.
Right.
So eat and sleep. But second of all, yeah. So the way creatine would help you gain weight outside of that fluid shift is by doing more work, doing more damage, recovering from it harder. That's how
Yep.
muscle grows. Needing protein, muscles are made of protein. So yeah,
Yep.
creatine allows you to do more work, really, to really
Yep.
sum it down. So it's how you kind of weaponize that in your body and allow it to grow and create new muscle. That's how you would gain the body mass that becomes the functional weight that you need for your sport.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think when athletes think of taking creatine and they want to gain muscle mass, gain weight per se, a lot of them don't realize that it's what you just threw in there really fast that I'm going to come back to and I want us to talk about for a second is eat and sleep, fuel and recover. And so let's talk a minute as to sports dietitians and what helping athletes, parents, coaches understand, what does a day of eating look like for an athlete that could be taking or could not be taking creatine in order to fuel muscle growth and to fuel growth and development, but also muscle growth, because we know we've seen athletes gain muscle without taking creatine before. And so obviously it can help, But let's talk about the diet or the eating plan that needs to be in place to optimize that creatine supplementation so that you're getting the best benefit from your training, your recovery, and your nutrition.
Yeah, so creatine in muscles at any age, like I said, it just allows you to do more energy. I'd
Right.
argue, for the parents out there, I'd argue creatine is probably more important 50 plus to maintain muscle health, because you
Yeah.
start to have some muscle, weakening and whatnot that's just age related. Creatine, everyone's like, oh, my bench is going to go up. Yeah, you're also probably in like a level of strength training you've never done before. So it's not
Mhm.
always just the creatine, right? Now, creatine will allow you to take that,
Testosterone
right? Yeah, but it's also,
that
yeah,
you're
just
naturally producing. Yes.
yeah, but your training age, you're growing. So now your
Yeah.
frame can carry more, your set point
Yep.
changes. So all these things are going on. So it's never just one thing, right?
Hmm.
But when you're in that phase, when you are growing, again, creatine allows you to do a little bit more work. That's
Right.
really all it does, right?
Right.
So it all comes down to, am I fueling, giving my body the nutrients it needs to literally grow? And as I'm growing, to add the more muscle that's my frame is more comfortable handling, that my
Hmm.
strength coach has planned out for me, right? So it is just understanding just really how high those needs are. I mean, you hear all the stories of, the mom with four college football players, and it's like 7 gallons of milk a day or whatever, right? Like there's just
Hmm.
needs are just really, really high. And
Yeah.
anytime you're shorting yourself on the fuel you have in your hydration, your sleep, your recovery, you're just wasting that effort, really.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, for me, you've got the 4 hours of training. It's what you do the other 20. Everyone has those 4 hours of 2 a days in the summer or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't even think you can do 2 a days anymore, but you know what I'm
Yeah.
talking about. All teams have the same amount of practices they can have.
Yeah.
That's all kind of regulated now. You win by out recovering the opponent, right? What you
Love
do
it.
on the field,
Yes.
everybody's got those same opportunities, right? You have an opportunity to kind of take those other 20 hours, and that's where it is. Am I getting the protein in? Do I have enough carbohydrates to fuel the energy? Did I
Yep.
replace my hydration and electrolytes?
Yep.
It's unfortunate. Well, fortunately for us, because it's science. Foundational is really, it's
Right.
not exciting, but like your
Right.
mom's right.
The
Like
day
eat
to
your
day.
veggies and drink your milk, and kind of,
Hmm.
you're not going to recover fully off a vending machine or a
Right.
convenience store. So
Right. I worked obviously at TCU for 10 and a half years and coached Jim Schlossnagle college baseball. And, we went to the College World Series multiple times, and he just has such this history of winning. And I'm like, if anyone knew anything about him, he's all about the day to day, the day to day. And what I like to call it's the compound effect. He and I were doing a podcast one time, and I mentioned the compound effect, and he pulls the book off off his shelf while we're talking. And the compound effect is small, seemingly insignificant things done over and over and over again add up to results. And so, parents, coaches, and athletes, from a sports dietitian perspective, that starts with your plate. And for athletes who want to gain mass, want to gain muscle, we're wanting them to eat multiple times a day. I would say probably no less than 6, because we want them eating every few hours. And that does start with breakfast, like breaking the fast. Athletes that want to gain weight or muscle. And I say, oh, what do you eat for breakfast? And they're like, oh, I don't eat breakfast. Or like, I eat a banana. And I'm like, okay, you don't actually want to gain weight. So starting with a breakfast of carbohydrate, protein, healthy fat. Joel talked about milk, fruit, all of the things. And then fueling consistently. My last podcast in between the one Joel and I did, I talked about the power of protein. So distributing protein over the course of the day so that you're giving your body what it needs. So thinking about that plate and making sure that it has carbohydrate, protein, and color, and then filling it in with snacks. Like I always joke with young athletes that I think snacks are like the glue that hold the sports nutrition puzzle together. And an athlete just can't get enough nutrition off breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Like you've got to insert snacks pre-workout, post-workout, in the morning, between breakfast and lunch when you're at school, nighttime, especially if you have an afternoon workout. Man, getting a snack after dinner. And I think that the frequency of fueling has such an impact that athletes they just take for granted, and especially in growth and development. When you are in that 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th grade, I mean, that is when you are the most metabolically active you are probably like ever going to be. And so really fueling consistently, making sure that you're getting carbohydrate, protein every couple of hours, getting your hydration in, getting those antioxidant rich foods. So we joke at fruits and vegetables kind of being like, so boring, but I'm like, this is the way I like to talk about fruits and vegetables, like vitamins and minerals. I like to liken them to the behind the scenes crew at a big sporting event. You really don't know they're there, but if they weren't, the whole scene would fall apart. Like nothing would work properly. And so trying to focus on those things that we want athletes to do every single day, while it might seem boring, that boring and that consistency is typically what leads to success. Then when you take things like creatine and you add this like little ingredient, magic ingredient on top of this like really stable staple plan, that is, I think, where athletes really start to see the difference and the results. Because Joel, it all boils down to how fast am I going to see results if I'm doing this? And so I'm going to ask you that question. How fast would I see results? I'm going to say it's based on what you're eating in your creatine supplementation, not just how much are you lifting in the weight room and your creatine supplementation.
Yeah, I think obviously if you're loading, you'll notice it a little bit faster than if
Mm-hmm.
you're not. But what you should see is just a little bit you're able to do, whether it's one extra rep or a couple extra pounds,
Mm-hmm.
or you're just like, wait, I got more. Like this used
Yeah.
to feel sad. So part of it means you're making the adaptations because you're doing everything right. But that's
Right.
kind of what you see it. You just have a little bit more energy to do the things that you need to do. And I kind of want to, I guess, kind of touch back on your compound kind of idea. It
Compound
goes the
effect.
other way too, right? So
Yes.
what we'll see is people get super motivated in the off season and they're doing everything
Mm-hmm.
right. And then they're like, oh, I'm going to slack on this. I'm going to slack on my eating. And those, as much as small positive wins track up,
Yep.
small negative, you have got the same exact. So every training, every game is an opportunity to get better, to fuel your body
Yep.
better, to recover from it. But when you don't, that's when you see teams halfway through the season, when you want to be peaking towards the playoffs, it's injuries, it's illness, it's all these things because you're
Yep.
chronically under recovering, right?
Yep.
I say it's not easy to overtrain. It's hard to overtrain. It's very easy to under recover, right? And
Yes.
that's when, whether it's nutrition, your sleep, it has to be everything. It has to be the nutrition, it has to
Yep.
be the sleep. But yeah, so I think you'll start to see the cumulative effect of good habits pretty soon, and creatine being one of them
Right.
potentially. But once you start doing, oh, I'm doing this right, you're generally going to start doing a couple other things right, and
Yeah,
that's
they
when you're
can
going to
come
start feeling
together.
like, oh God, like because
Yeah.
we work with a lot of athletes. Yeah, I've seen you play a game on awful nutrition. Just
Right.
because you can doesn't mean you should, and that's not going to show up over time, right? So
Right.
I would say for 20 years of human performance, 90% of what I do is on the foundational human, right? Like when I started my career, I
Mm-hmm.
chased that top 2%, like, okay, what's your creatine? What's your this, that? But if you're a 60% human and I got 2% on top of that,
Yeah.
you're still getting beat by the guy who's 80% of
Yep.
a foundational human. So understanding
Love it.
as kind of uh you may have tuned into this podcast thinking like, okay, cool, they're just going to tell me creatine's the best, it's going to solve everything. Fortunately, that's not the answer. It's a
Mm.
tool in doing everything right, and it's
Yeah.
consistent habits all the way around, fueling and recovery.
Yep, I love that. One of my favorite quotes that I've like ever heard was Ray Lewis. And, as he quote unquote aged in the NFL and was, I mean, just a little specimen of a human, of a linebacker. But, one of the things he said, I see all these young kids coming in, eating their fast food and doing whatever they're going to do. And he's like, the one thing I always tell them is, you won't ever be able to beat me because your fuel won't let you.
Amazing.
Isn't that great? I'm like, thank you, Ray
Yeah.
Lewis, for such a great, like, your fuel won't let you. And even though he was so much older, he was so diligent about nutrition and the recovery and the day to day. And those are the people that you see live in professional sports forever and ever and ever. They're the ones that do it all right. I mean, hello, you
Mm.
worked with Tom Brady for how many years? Like, he's one of those that does the day in, does the day out, and you survive longer. And one of the things I always tell young athletes is like, you can survive through a lot of things. You can survive through a lot of training sessions, survive through a lot of workouts. But if you want to thrive through a workout, you best be fueling it, hydrating, recovering after, and doing everything that you can do, because surviving doesn't really make you better. It's thriving that makes you
Yeah.
run faster, jump higher, lift heavier. And you have to put in the work, and the work being in the weight room or on the field, course, wherever you are. But it's also in the kitchen, at the lunchroom, and the snacks. And that's where I think so many athletes, I just think that is often the missing link and can literally be the cheat code for a lot of athletes when it comes to performance.
Yeah, and we see how many athletes that we worked with, like, oh, I wish I knew you when I was younger, right? I wish I had these
Right.
habits early,
So
right?
many, so many.
And
Yes.
and sport, it's kind of the inherent nature of sport to kind of normalize the suck. Like you're like, oh, sport's supposed to hurt or it's supposed to, but there's
Right.
certain things that don't have to be true. Like you
Yeah.
shouldn't take protein and your stomach hurt, right? You shouldn't
Right.
wake up with like a knot in your calf. You shouldn't be groaning when you get up after practice, right?
Yeah.
These are all things
Yeah.
that's just signs of under recovery, right? But it's just
Right.
such a normal part of the and I've got I forget which coach said it was kind of great. He's like fit doesn't mean fueled or fit doesn't mean healthy or something like that.
Yeah. It
Like
doesn't.
there's a lot
Yeah.
going on inside of you. Like you're asking your body a lot. Like I always call, like I said, I started my career in the ICU. I look at sports as intentional trauma. We're
It is.
doing damage to the body on purpose, right? So
Yeah.
of course we're going to need more nutrients if we're recovering from, a
Right.
car crash, right? So same amount of nutrients,
Yep.
like obviously different. And in this case, we know it's going to happen, so we can plan for it. So
Yep.
all
I have
kind of just big picture stuff to think about as you're deciding is a supplement right for me.
I remember you saw when I first started working in the NFL with the Cowboys. I remember you saying that you're like, basically, we have a car crash every week. We have a few days to prepare for the car crash, a few days to recover from it, and then we just start preparing for it again. And that's true in a lot of sports. And so, to athletes out there, parents, coaches, I would encourage first, fuel and hydrate. Second, look at what supplements can benefit what you're already doing. What supplements can help give you an edge? And I think Joel and I will both agree that go back and watch our last podcast, or if you did not listen to it or watch it, you can watch it on YouTube as well. And if you did not, because if you are going to supplement, we want you to supplement safe. And I think it's worth saying again that if you choose to take creatine, we want you to be taking a third-party tested creatine. Our gold standards are NSF, certified for sport, and then Informed Sport, which is a part of Informed Choice. Joel talked a lot about what that means and stuff in our last podcast, but worth mentioning again that you can look at nsfsport.com or the app NSF Sport. And then for Informed Sport, the website is WeTestYouTrust.com, and their app is Informed Sport. And you can look products, you can look at brands. And so no matter what age athlete you are, what level of sport you play, I don't care if you're the dad working out, on the weekends, or you're going into some draft, we want to make sure that you are supplementing with supplements that are not only we know have like they work, they're efficient and they work, but that they're safe. So do your due diligence in taking those third-party supplements. And then in regards to all the other things that go with supplementing, re-listen to us today so that you can think through how you do that. And then I would say, if you really want to maximize your nutrition, working with a sports dietitian is what's going to help you individualize it the most and figure out what works best for your training schedule, your recovery, your eating, your food likes, dislikes, etc. My team at the Sports Nutrition Playbook, we have sports dietitians that specialize in helping young athletes with meal planning, with kind of just finagling it. I mean, like nutrition's a lot of logistics when it comes to high school and college as well. And so learning, I think, how to finagle your nutrition into your day amidst school training, weight room, icing, training room, all the things you have to do. So we would love to work with you. Joel, final thoughts on what an athlete should do, a young athlete should do if they're wanting to take creatine. What would be your top recommendation for them?
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing is finding a third party NSF
Yep.
certified for sport, so you know what you're putting in is good. It's going to do what you say. It's going to be absorbed the best it can be. And just reiterating that more is not better. This isn't something
Yep.
you can take more of, right? So I know we touched on a lot here. I know Amy and I could each do another 3 hours on this.
Yeah.
I will say for those who are kind of wanting more or think about this in a couple weeks, the International Society for Sports Nutrition has a really great paper
Mhm.
out called Common Questions and Misconceptions About Creatine Supplementation. So it dives into a little bit further some of the common things or what we've heard you may run across, like from
Yep.
coaches or parents or whoever, like, oh no, creatine is does this or does that. There's a lot of it's crazy. We're still debunking things from the 90s, but we are, right?
Yeah,
So
we are.
really great paper there, and it's written, kind of in approachable terms. It's a journal paper, but it's really just kind of a discussion, and it's wildly referenced. So just that's a great jump off to kind of either go back and
Yeah.
I want to read more about this or whatnot. Just a great resource there for sure.
We will put the link
Yeah,
in the show notes. I will have Joel send it to me. We'll put the link in the show notes
yeah,
so that you can access that. Because the more you know, the better. I mean, what we're really advocating for is be informed, do what's individually best for you. And only you are going to like know that working with your sports performance team, sports medicine team, sports dietitian. But the more informed you are, the better choices you're usually going to make. So awesome. All right, Joel. So the podcast that you do with Thorn, tell us about that. So if they want to know all about supplements, they can go get another dose of Joel at.
yeah. So all my and one of many people credentialed at Thorn that write on our blog pretty daily. So
Mhm.
it's thorn.com, THORNE, and there's a kind of tab there. It's Take Five Daily is our blog. And then we've got the Thorn podcast is on, all platforms, and I host an occasional one on specifically performance. So just other ways to educate yourself and be
Yep.
the best informed you can be.
Awesome. I love it. Thank you so much for your time. All of your insights. Truly, truly grateful.
Happy to be here.
All right. Thanks, Joel.